So, my name's John Spencer. I work for Toyota Australia as an infrastructure glue/troubleshooter. So this isn't my normal day job, but I'm here to talk about the hardware that you've got today, not the software. We're going to leave that to Andy to talk about next. So the equipment that you have in front of you, I'm going to do my best to explain how that goes together. First, this is sort of traditional. I just run through who the team is. They've come up as like 4 different things. I don't think we need to read all those names out. Most of you should know that already. The team sort of stays fairly consistent. Have a few nice additions like Nicola this year who managed to fix our documentation.
Thanks, Nicola.
Yeah. And yeah, like most years, we run this sort of out of the CCHS in Melbourne with a lot of support from John, Oxa. So first thing you might be wondering is, wait, it's another car. This is sort of take 2 of this particular project. In the last 12 months, the DingoCar software and our sort of subset of it, the DingoCar, has come a long way. Last year's board was problematic, but I mean, it worked perfectly. It was, how many days did it take, John? 4 days of you killing yourself again? Yeah. Yep, and holy cow, look at this sweet one. The addition of Lego points, I think, is pretty nice. I think it was a conversation. Who thought of it? It was a conversation in a car drive back for a different project in a car ride back. Yeah, Andy and John in the car from Canberra. So, just to run through the hardware, we have some new features. We have more amps. I think it's 5 amp. The previous one was maybe 3 if you were a good day and it was downhill. But this one should be capable of powering a Jetson Nano if you happen to have one of those. It's Lego compatible. That's nothing to be sneezed at. We have a nice big OLED. I wanted a small one, but hey. We still have 8 PWM pins, although at one point that was down to 4, so consider yourself lucky. And it has a LiPo charger, which I'll mention a little bit later. It's powered by a Raspberry Pi. This wasn't something we had anything to do with, unfortunately. That just was good luck more than good management. The chassis. The chassis was almost entirely designed by Andrew Nielsen. It was really his baby. He's a draftsman, so it was using raw AutoCAD, which would have driven me crazy. He did a lot of iterations, so it was really a case of fix it, tweak it, go again. And Lego tolerances, as you've probably all noticed, is if you try and plug the Lego in from the wrong side, just the tolerances of our laser for cutting them out at CCHS meant that it doesn't fit one way, or doesn't fit well one way, or it's super loose. So that was something he got to enjoy. We also have the Dingo Cap, which is a redesign of last year's board. We got rid of some. Last year there was actually 2 boards. There was one that I designed and sent off to China, and I think it arrived about a week after the conference finished, which wasn't really helpful to anyone who was participating. And then we had John's board, and John obviously designed it completely separately and assembled it. We sort of looked at what features both those boards had, and it was mostly common, but shrunk it down to be get rid of the stuff we didn't need, and then added a bunch more stuff on it that we might need. We'll see. This year it was completely designed in KiCad. It has obviously the 128 by 64 pixel OLED, or there's an extra I2C pin that you can get to, which will fit with a 12832. It still has 8 servo controls. There's some power management gear in there. It'll tell you what your battery charge is like. Has a DC in and LiPo charging for values of charging, and a MPU to do accelerometer work. There's also a couple of extra pins. There's an ultrasonic sensor on one side. There are 2 buttons that you can't use because the because the buttons didn't arrive. There are 4.5mm buttons where the standard's normally 6, so they're a little bit harder to get. And obviously you could also stick your NeoPixels off to the side.
One question then.
Certainly.
Do DingoCar stop those buttons?
I
do not.
No, JCar don't.
232 have them.
I'm not sure actually.
They are 4.5mm tact switches, which are an unusual size.
Yes.
Easy to buy in China, not in Australia.
AliExpress certainly stocks them, but you'll have to wait.
You talk about battery charging. Does it charge?
I'll get to that. Hang on a second. We're designing KiCad. David Tour's doing a talk on that tomorrow. It's probably the only CAD tool I've ever used for doing circuit design. So, well, I like it, but then I haven't been corrupted by Eagle or what's going to be Fusion 360 in the future or any of the ones that cost money. There's a few things that didn't work. My grammar is always a little bit off. The LiPo charger, I think it's limited to 100 milliamps. 200, oh, we got 200. That's not enough. It gets a bit flaky when you plug them both in. You will, yeah. The NPU is quite close to the Pi CPU, and also, whatever you do, don't plug anything into the barrel jack when you've got the NiCad battery plugged in. I'm not sure if it will catch a fire immediately. It may not catch fire at all, but yeah, you can try that yourself. I think I've warned you.
No, but why is it a problem? Not what happens, but...
We're probably maybe one good revision off it being a good circuit board. That's why it's a problem. So it caught us a bit, yeah, it's... We always get to these projects over Christmas, and...
No, I was wondering whether there was some other reason.
No, it did largely just shorts things out a little bit in a bad way.
But you can't charge a nickel metal hydride.
You can't.
LiPo charger.
Different charges, and the way that the charge circuit works is a little bit weird. Like, you can't necessarily power the LiPo using the barrel jack, so that's something to bear in mind as well. If you don't have a battery plugged in, it will not work.
The NPU being too close to the CPU.
Yep.
Are you actually seeing interference?
It's probably more a heat problem. It's trying to keep things into the Raspberry Pi hat format is limiting. And there's a lot on this board and a lot of three-dimensional things that make things fun, like getting the OLED on there. Just meant that there was some sacrifices that had to be made. If you do run into problems, you can use one of the PWM headers to run a fan down the side. The spacing of the two panels should be sufficient that you can run a 25mm fan down the side. That spacing's made to fit inside standard Lego blocks. So just if you're ever curious why it's a strange shape and strange size. And my talk's very short, as you probably already noticed. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming to this. And I've got one last slide, which is just the hardware team for hire, so to speak. Most of the hardware was done by four of us, Andrew, myself, Bob, and John Oxer. Andrew and I are both gainfully employed, although we do have some stuff up there. But John and Bob are both contractors of various sorts, and you probably don't realise, but John does a huge amount for this project every year. Nearly kills himself every year. It is a lot of work to get all this together, both from a soft standpoint and get all registrations, as you probably notice when they come in fairly late. On top of that, hardware assembly, soldering, stuff like that. So, yeah, make sure you jump on and follow his YouTube channel, because the more follows, the more guilty he feels, and the more he has to do more YouTube. And Patreon maybe not always the best of platforms, but I'm sure he appreciates an extra cup of coffee every day or every month or whatever it is that it works out to be. But that's the end of my very short talk. If you do have more detail, if you want more details about the hard design, feel free to come and chat to me. This talk's always a bit hard to measure, getting the right balance between the real nitty-gritty versus the sort of the overview. So thank you all. The next talk will be by Andy. He'll probably take a few minutes to set up, but thanks again.